So if I can get a little bit of positive reaction from them in the beginning, then I can use that as rocket fuel and get through it.
Cool.
Welcome to Inspiring Teachers, a show bringing you classroom tips, motivation, and stories from successful educators. Join Tavis Beam and Danny Hogger as they explore the why of teaching.
Welcome to Inspiring Teachers. We're in Stockton, California today at 105.9 The Bull. Wow, this is where I started my radio career. Can you believe it?
What year was that?
That was the year of our Lord. I don't know. 2006? 2007?
Not that long ago.
Not that long ago. But oh, how I've grown.
Yes,
Both as a person and conceptually. I didn't know I was a concept until right now. But now that I know I've grown
The
conceptually.
Danny Hogger experience.
And I am Danny Hogger, and experiencing this with me is Tavis Beam, as always. And we're here with Johnny Milford. Johnny, thanks so much for joining us
You're welcome.
today.
And I am standing up, so don't ask.
Thank you. Well, it's conceptualizing, still growing in concept. We're all at different phases of our development. Johnny, I'm so glad that you joined us, and it means a lot to me to spend some time with you today, and to do it in front of an audience is really cool too. You've meant a lot to me in my development, although I'm not sure I knew it early on. You know, it's something that when I'd come over and hang out at the house, and then you'd be working, I'm like, wait, but what does he do? You know, what does he do when he goes back in his office? I assumed you were some kind of stockbroker.
Yeah.
And
I dress like one, yeah.
I remember the first time I came in and saw your recording studio, it's just like, wait, hold on. You can be an independent worker? An independent, what's this now? What is this? I thought you had to work at an office and work a traditional schedule, and I didn't know there were opportunities. So in a lot of ways, you opened my eyes to that there are other people that are doing amazing things out there and doing it by their own book. And I was so impressed by that.
I worked from home before it was really a thing.
It's pretty awesome. And I was so impressed once I figured out the kind of work it was. And I think subconsciously, we track things in our mind and in our memories that mean more to us later down the road. And I never knew I'd be interested in radio, but I had to have been thinking at that time that what a cool thing to be able to do, and I always thought you were so talented with your voice and with your production.
Yeah,
so
thank you.
Thanks a lot for taking time to be with us today. So on Inspiring Teachers, we've been talking to elementary, middle, primary. That was also elementary, so I named that twice. But they're not twice as important as everyone else, are they? They're just not.
We're all important.
We're all important, conceptually. So you did have some time as a classroom teacher
Yes.
at Delta College, correct?
Yes.
How did you first, though, come into any form of radio? What was your path like? Let's start at the start.
Well, how much time do we have?
As much as you want.
This is
Conceptually,
YouTube.
we have as much bandwidth.
This will all end up on the editing room floor. Now, when I was about 7 years old, I lived downtown, right across from where the arena and the hotel downtown Stockton is now. There was an old Victorian house, and we grew up there. And I came home from school one day, and my brother had won a contest on this station called K-Joy. It was 1280 AM, and it was downtown, just a few blocks from our house. And he was charged with taking care of me, watching me after school. So of course, being 7 years old, I had to go along with him to go pick up the prize. And we walked into the radio station, and I was like, oh my gosh, look at this. This guy is wearing headphones and talking into a microphone, making smart aleck comments and playing great music and drinking coffee and getting paid too. I was like, that's for me. And so at 7 years old, I knew that's what I wanted to do.
Were you listening to a lot of radio, or was it that experience that kick-started the notion?
That really kick-started the notion. Then I had a little transistor radio, the kind that we used to, they look like cell phones basically. I held it to my ear and I listened constantly. And so I would mimic, even at a very young age, mimic DJs and try to talk up song ramps and just knew and got in touch with people there that became lifelong friends, even at a very young age. And
Your heart was in it, and you had the voice for it too.
well, I developed.
Not at 7.
No,
Yeah.
no, and even not now. Really, I don't think. I mean, I just you develop. You use what
Right.
God gives you, and you just. There are plenty of times where I hear other radio guys, and I think, oh, that's the voice I wish I had.
Right. Yeah.
What kind of voices were those that appealed to you, that you were impressed by or entertained by?
Oh my gosh! In the '70s, especially, everybody on the radio had a big. Even the women had big, manly voices.
Mhm.
And there was a, hey, da 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 da, and everybody talked fast, and you got a lot of creativity in about an 8-second intro, and that just blew me away because the energy was just constantly moving forward and very fast and funny, and it was just entertaining, and that inspired me today. Even though that style of radio is long gone, it still can't help but influence me even to this day. So, which I guess that probably makes me sound like a dinosaur on the radio.
You really got to see the transition over
Yes.
the many years. I entered radio right when they were switching over to the modern way of doing it. So I sort of caught the tail end of the old antiquated way when I worked for a public radio station, doing the bits in between each show. I would say, funds for this program are provided in part by, and say the little ditty, and then hit play on the next thing, and then I'd go juggle for an hour because I didn't have anything to do because they're hour-long shows. But it must be quite an experience to now have a computer flashing at you.
Oh my gosh, yeah, and when I started in radio, of course, we had reel-to-reels, and so we actually physically edited with, cut and paste. These actually come from things that, like when you're doing...
These terms once meant something.
when you did documents, you actually had to cut and paste. I actually was in journalism as well through high school, the school newspaper. We actually did cut and paste and mock up pages. And I would never go back to those days. People pine for the days of digital, of audio, analog audio tape, and no way, I would never ever go back. If I woke up and this was all just a digital dream, I'd be like, no! I love having computer screens and being able to do non-destructive editing, and I love technology. Technology is good and bad, but mostly good, I think.
Yeah, definitely. If it wasn't for technology, we wouldn't be doing this.
Reel-to-reel podcasts.
So besides the DJs, what kind of programs did you listen to in the long form, or you were mostly a fan of the music radio at the time?
Yeah, definitely the music radio. My dad, on the other hand, when I was in the car with him, he listened to KCBS News Radio 74 always when I was a kid. But I came to realize as I got older that really is a form of top 40 radio, just without the music. Because it really, they're going from one element to another. The energy is fairly high. They're not screaming, of course, but they're constantly moving from one story to another, to traffic, to weather, to another story. And so I thought, wow, that really is kind of that type of style. Just no music. You're substituting that with stories and whatnot. So the elements are there.
A lot of times I compare, and people ask me, especially my students, because I always give them my background. I want them to know all about me so they feel comfortable being themselves and know that if I open up, so can they. And I'll tell them, they always ask at the end of the radio experience and the music experience, well, why are you teaching? How did you get here? And I always say, what are we doing here? I have a certain amount of time to get across a certain amount of material. You are my audience. And if I do a good job, the rating stays high and we're successful together. We're message communicators. We're communicators.
When I do my radio show in the morning, I assume that I'm an interruption to the music. People are listening for the music. And I want to be in and out, in and out, in and out. And so I don't want to babble all day about, hey, I did this yesterday and I was and take a bunch. I'll be very personal and I'll talk about my life, but I want to be in and out, hit and run, and because I'm conscious about the listener's time. And I'm very grateful that they've given me time in the morning to listen, and I know that they only have a certain amount of time. I don't want to bore them. I want to get in and out. I want to entertain, hopefully, and inform, and get back to the music, and then, rinse and repeat.
Very good.
Because now your competition also is not just other radio stations, but podcasts and all the other things that people... Not that you shouldn't stop listening to podcasts.
Well, and that's true. People say, well, why should anybody listen to... People don't listen to radio anymore. And one of the reasons is because over the years, it started really in the 80s, consultants told radio stations, hey, tell the DJs to shut up. Stop talking, play music. Well, now there's so many different other ways to get music much better.
Right.
The frequency response is better. So if people are going to listen to our radio station, I want to give them a reason. I mean, everything that I give them, they can get someplace else. I give them weather, traffic, news, information, all of that stuff, the music, they can get someplace else.
Yeah.
But I try to bring it all together, and we talk about Stockton, we talk about things that they can relate to, neighborhoods that there are things that are going on here, and all in one quick and hopefully painless way.
And nowadays, with education, the kids can get all that online as well. You can find every lesson that we teach online. And so we need to think in the same terms, I think, that we need to understand they could get this somewhere else. Why are they coming to us? What are we bringing to them that is beyond just the base education. I can go on YouTube and I can literally type in the chapter title of this math textbook and I can find that lesson. It's there. Somebody's made it. I got through Calculus 1 and 2 because of YouTube.
Right.
So what is the teacher bringing to that class,
Yeah,
that
great,
lesson?
Great comparison, yes.
So your brother wins the contest?
Yes.
And then you're moving down the road, you're growing up older, you're practicing, you're mimicking, you're listening. When do you get opportunity to get involved?
Okay, so the person that I met on the radio at that time was a guy named Roy Williams, and he was just the afternoon DJ at that time. And I kept in touch. I would go downtown. Since I lived downtown, when I moved north, I would stay. He kept that job for a long time, became program director, and I would go downtown and keep in touch with all the people at KJOY. And so by the time I left high school and got into college, at Delta College, I took the radio programs, but also took all the general ed that I definitely needed because I need to have a fallback, because no chance that I'd make it in radio. And so then finally, after a semester or two on the college radio station, I contacted Roy, and he said, yeah, and I you can probably tell by my delivery, I'm not a very confident person necessarily, so I was like, well, yeah, here's my tape, and I'm well, it turns out that I didn't get hired right away. He said I would need a few more semesters, and I found out from somebody else that was working there that had I had a little more confidence, he would have hired me on the spot.
Wow.
He knew I could do it, but he didn't think that I felt I could do it. So a couple months later, I put together a new tape, and I called him up. I said, hey, I think you'll like the tape. I'd like to meet with you. I think you'll hear improvement. And I was really trying to sell myself. Inside, I was like, oh.
Feeling every
But,
word
yes,
that you were saying.
Exactly. But I sold it, and it worked. Sucker.
The confidence is so important. The way you deliver, you would have the depth, have the experience, have the knowledge, and if you can't convey it, like there's a million people who have the expertise to teach but couldn't functionally carry out the requirements and couldn't carry out the classroom lecture, right?
Yeah.
And it's important too, especially when we're teaching something like history to high schoolers. You have to be confident in the way you deliver, and something you said earlier, sometimes you have to get out of the way.
Right.
You have to sometimes get your mental picture out of the way to
Absolutely.
really do an appropriate job of conveying the material fairly.
Right.
So that's really interesting. So you took the lesson. You found out from a friend that note about confidence. And
Yes.
you would have,
Yeah.
How did you take that? How do you deal with a setback like that? And what kept you motivated? Why didn't you just walk away and think?
Well, I kind of thought before he came to visit me and tell me that, I kind of thought, well, little chance that I'll ever work in radio. And so I kind of just thought, well, I'll just manage a Chuck E. Cheese, and that'll be my life. And then that would have been fine. Probably better in many ways.
Hashtag looking for sponsors.
But no, it was a great lesson. It didn't. I wasn't dejected. It was the opposite of being dejected. What would that opposite be? It was motivating, actually. And I thought, well, cool. Well, now it was really a case of fake it till you make it.
Right.
And that's been, I think, my mantra throughout my life, because I've jumped at things that I really shouldn't have done, and some opportunities I haven't taken because I was a little too afraid to.
Right.
But I think sometimes you just get in there. Teaching was a great example. I mean, you mentioned that I did teach for a couple of semesters,
Yeah.
and that was something. Oh, there's no way I can do that. I mean, I really admire what you guys can do. It's one thing to be in a booth with nobody around and playing radio, but when you're in front of people who oftentimes don't look like they want to be there, it could be a tough crowd. I know that. So it was one of those where I had to fake it till I could make it, and I think that's good advice for a lot of things.
Right.
Just false confidence at first, and it comes with a little bit of success, and humor has always been something that I try.
And I wonder how you would have been had you stepped into the radio station and not had that confidence yet. If he had hired you that first time, how would that have affected your performance?
Would have fallen flat on my face,
Right.
probably. And if I had too much confidence, I've seen plenty of people in the business.
Sure.
Right, the hubris
Right,
take you down.
And their talent didn't quite match the confidence.
There really is this sweet spot of,
Right.
I'm phoning a lot of this in right now, my confidence anyway, but
I'm not going to step on anybody else's feet
Right.
in the meantime.
Yeah.
I definitely saw plenty of people like that go through AM 830 in LA and think that I'm going right to the top and shoot themselves in the foot in the process.
Yeah.
But I think I erred a little bit on your side too, where sometimes the squeaky wheel does get the grease, and if you are quiet, compliant, and amicable, well, you'll just stay there
Yes.
being quiet, compliant, and amicable.
Absolutely. There's a fine line between humility and you have to have confidence. Cockiness is very unattractive. Confidence goes along.
It's like the gadfly. He's got to be buzzing around them just enough that they're like this. They know you're there.
But you don't want to get
That's right.
swatted.
When you walked into the classroom, what were you thinking about? Do you remember your mentality and
What
your
have I done?
approach?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I was very, very nervous, and I'm like that with any public speaking. And I consider teaching very much. I mean, it's public speaking.
Sure.
And I'm that way. I'm nervous right now. Believe it or not. I mean, it's.
But we wouldn't know it. And so I wondered if it's always a concept of like the feelings you have inside versus what people can see on the outside, right?
Well, and for me, I've done a lot of theater, and so is my brother and my sister, and I was really nervous before a performance once.
Yes.
And my brother told me, don't think of it as nervousness. Change it in your mind. Call it excitement. So when you get that feeling of nervousness, I say, oh, now I'm excited to do this. And it motivates me more because now I'm changing that energy into something that is more positive.
And I counsel people that when they're nervous before, plenty of musician friends that are nervous before every gig. Once they're on stage, they're in their element, they're great. But I think nerves are a good sign. It means you care.
Right.
Yeah.
If you're, I got this, then...
And it keeps it interesting, to be honest. Otherwise, it'd be boring if we didn't get that little shot of like, ooh, this could go wrong.
And as I said, I mean, humor works for me when I'm giving a public address of some kind, because once I hear the audience laugh or go any kind of reaction like that, then it kind of boosts, and then I'm like, okay, I can relax a little bit. But because I automatically, if I'm taking a stage or going up to the classroom or talking in front of anybody, I kind of assume that they don't want to hear this. They don't, they're just thinking, who's this guy? So if I can get a little bit of positive reaction from them in the beginning, then I can use that as rocket fuel and get through.
Very cool. Yeah. It's like an object in motion stays in motion.
Correct.
You know, if you can get them to just budge, you can be all right and push them where you want to get them, or at least push them somewhere.
Yes.
So what did you start teaching?
When or what?
What?
Oh, broadcasting. Yeah, broadcast production of all things.
I had a feeling, but I didn't want to.
Well, it was
Quantum physics.
No wonder I was nervous. Yeah.
Cut to like 2 beakers exploding, right? It's always 2 beakers.
Right.
Like graduated cylinders, pink, blue, explosion, cut back.
Right.
We need some animators too when we get down the line. And go ahead.
Yeah, so can you talk a little bit about your experience doing broadcasting?
Oh my gosh.
Because you went through a broadcasting program, but there's a big difference from being a student to being the teacher. How did you organize your information? What did you do to get, like, day one, it's like, hi, now what?
It was horrible. Not for the students, but for me going into it, because I was approached. I had already retired from radio at that point. Never to go back. Never say never. And so I was working from home. My studio business, which we can get back to if you care to, was doing very well. And then I was approached to teach at Delta, and by recommendation from somebody else. And I said, would you be interested in doing this? And I said, well, I'd be interested in discussing it. So we discussed it and got farther and farther along, got closer to the start date. And they said, well, you do have your master's, don't you? I actually did laugh at the person. And I said, no, very few people in radio have a master's.
Right.
So
Try bachelor's first, and then work your way.
That was it.
Try AA, and then we'll work our way around.
Well, yeah. Hi, my name's Johnny, and yes, I'm a workaholic. Not that AA. Okay, sorry. He did say. Then he said, "Oh, your bachelor's," and I said, "No." Your associates, and I said, "No, actually, I have some completed classes." He said, "Well, how long have you been in the business?" And at that point, it had been 14 years. Oh, we call that equivalency, so that would be just fine.
Yeah,
so,
it's a good word.
Yeah, that's fine. So and that didn't help my confidence much either.
Did it feel like you were being made as an exception to come in?
Yeah, and I thought there's so many other people that are better qualified to do this. But
no, you have the equivalent of a master's degree, apparently.
Yeah, or more, probably. You know,
unfortunately, not the pay equivalent. But yeah. So before I started, they said, "Well, we're going to leave it all up to you, and you'll come up with a syllabus, and so I had to Google syllabus. I'm kidding, Google wasn't around then.
Yeah.
And so I had to come up with the lesson, and they had, well, there's a textbook, so we can buy it, or so what happened was I decided, and this is terrible, copyright infringement. I think the statute of
Hey,
limitations.
fair use also, educational provision. I have no idea what that means, but I always know it when I need it.
So basically what I did is I got the teacher's copy of the textbook, and I told the students, look, you have so many other classes that you're spending money on. Don't get the textbook. I will teach you from the textbook. And there's only so much you can learn from the textbook in this particular instance.
Absolutely.
And so, and then I went to see the studios. They were the exact same studios that I learned from in '82 and '83 when I went through the college program. So everything was just outdated completely. And it was pretty outdated when I went there. And so, oh my gosh, almost 20 years later, it reel-to-reels and cassette machines and not a computer to be found in the station. Wow. So I brought in my laptop, and I would do videos at home with my camcorder behind me and teaching them how to digitally edit with you
were doing YouTube before YouTube.
Yeah, exactly.
That's amazing.
They owe me, I think.
Yeah, it's about time to pay up. It's the three of us march to Google's offices. Let's see how that goes.
And so I did everything I could, and it was 2 days a week, so that was all right. 9:30, and I found it was a big interruption in my day because I was getting up at 4 or 5 to do my studio work, and then I would be working, and look up. Oh my gosh, it's 9:10. I've got a class in 20 minutes, and I have no idea what I'm going to do. So I would whip together something and hit copy, and put together lesson plans and just totally fly by the seat of my pants. I mean, really wing it. And I think it worked out pretty well.
Yeah.
I mean, the students had no idea what was going on behind the scenes because I was just like, oh.
But you presented the confidence, right? You didn't let them in on that. Would you be personal with them? Would you tell them stories about how you were?
Constantly. Yeah. And I would bring in people from the broadcast industry.
That's pretty neat.
Constantly. And finally, one of my students asked, all of these people are saying the same thing that you've been saying, that radio is not a very good business. And I said, well, I'm trying to be honest with you and teach you that there are a lot of pitfalls. I mean, it's great if it's what you want to do, but don't get into it thinking that, hey, I'm going to be able to take my own music in there and have fun and make a big fat paycheck like Rick Dees or Howard Stern or anybody. That's few and far between.
Sure.
It's one of those that you're going to probably work holidays. This is before automation. We had to work. I worked so many Christmas.
Oh, I did all 5 years of the 5 years that I would consider myself in, right? Definitely.
And I said, you're going to put in a lot of hard hours for a lot of, very little pay. And I'm trying to tell you the honesty of the business. And if that still doesn't scare you away like it didn't for me, then you'll possibly make it. But if you think, oh, no, that's not for me, then yeah, you'll want to walk away.
Right, it's like you've already chosen your course. It's always something that I've carried for my students, that if you ever let anyone dissuade you and talk you back from doing something, they've won. Right. And you've decided that path is closed. You are the one, though, that ultimately decides whether or not that path is followed or not, unless you decide that someone has talked you out or you're not good at something. Well, if your mind's made up, like you said earlier, if you're excited or if you're nervous, which one are you? Because you're going to act accordingly. Right, so I think that's very important. And the honesty is important, too, the transparency. You told me similar things as I was coming up, and it bore out true.
Yeah,
it absolutely did.
Those, yes.
And as time has continued to 2018, where we stand, it has continued to go down that path. Like when you look at the scope of radio today and what it is, how do you view it? What's your glimpse on it?
Well, I'm blessed to be in the situation that I'm in here because this is a locally owned mom-and-pop standalone radio station. And these jobs just don't exist. I mean, we're out in the middle of a pasture in Stockton, and no corporate influence, no corporate debt. We don't have consultants breathing down our necks. I mean, these types of, at the same time, though, we don't have those big budgets. We don't have the big ratings. So, I mean, there are positives and negatives, but I would not trade it ever. And that's why I got out of radio, because it was getting so homogenized and so corporate, and the fun. That was the main thing. I mean,
you're just playing the feed from corporate.
Exactly. And if you're chasing money in this business, you'll be usually sorely disappointed. But if you're chasing the fun and the fact that, I mean, this beats working for a living. I mean, it is work. I mean, I put in a lot of time, put in a lot of work.
Absolutely.
But it's not backbreaking, and it is fun, and that's why I got back in. I mean, I was out almost 18 years, never, ever, ever to return. And just when I thought I was out, they pulled me back in.
And the enjoyment is still there.
Oh my gosh, more than ever, really. I mean, this is, I love this, and I have no illusions. I mean, it could end tomorrow. Maybe something will happen, and they'll have to shut down the station tomorrow, and I'll just say, hey, thank you for the fun ride. It was great.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Whereas 30 years ago, 35, many years ago when I got into the business, it was like, oh my gosh, where's my next check going to be? I'm going to get fired. And try to laugh about everything. That's one thing that my parents gave me was a pretty good sense of humor. Not funny necessarily, but the ability to be able to joke and find humor in everything, even, gallows humor. And I think it's life's too serious a lot of times. And I think I just want to have fun, make fun of things, and hopefully not offend people, not make fun of people per se, but just I want people to be able to listen to me and go, wow, that was fun. I had fun. Much like when I did the ballpark announcing. Mm-hmm. We can talk about that. I did 8 seasons with the Stockton Ports, and I was not a baseball fan, not a sports fan at all. And they hired me, and I was like, wow. And they said, don't worry, you'll learn the game. We just want you to do your personality. And so my goal at the ballpark was to have somebody attend who was like me. Maybe they got dragged to the ballpark, they're not a sports fan, but maybe they'll walk away and go, that was fun. The stuff between all the game was all right, but all the stuff that was going on between innings, that was fun.
Yeah, and that's where the fun happens.
Yeah, the sound effects and the music and the little comments and things like that. Have fun. So that's my mantra, is to just have fun with things.
And it's super important for us as teachers too, because you never know what your students coming in with, what kind of baggage they're bringing into the room, and sometimes a joke here or there, some self-deprecating humor can hook somebody in and at least make them feel this is a safe place, trusted place, and it's a place that you can enjoy something. And I always think about the lessons outside the book that are going to be way more important that I hope I can impart more than the lessons that I teach. Right?
And they see, he's being playful, so I have the liberty to be playful.
Yeah, I think it relaxes people a lot.
Right.
Yeah. And that's a good point. You don't know what their situation at home is. You don't know what happened in the class before. You don't know what they have to go home to.
Right.
And similar with my radio audience, I don't know what their day's been like. I don't know. They may be on their way to a horrible job. They may have all kinds of terrible things in their lives. So maybe this can be a quick distraction for them. Mm-hmm. And even we have to talk about terrible news in the world sometimes. And I won't make light of that. But talk about it and then move on and try to,
Right.
There is recovery. There is other life. There is other brightness elsewhere,
exactly,
right?
yes.
Who then keeps you inspired today? Who keeps you positive? Who do you look to and enjoy what they do? Who makes you laugh?
Wow, that's a really good question.
I'm glad I could get one. There you go. See, that's a classroom teacher.
That is it right there.
Well, I do country radio. I was not a country fan, and people will say, well, you're still not if you're listening to today's country, because it's very pop influenced. And I got in a very good time because, I grew up with R&B and big R&B fan, and so a lot of the country artists today grew up with that. They grew up listening to classic country, but they also grew up listening to hip-hop artists, and that kind of influences their music. When I was thinking about Roy Clark, who died recently at 85, and it made me think about Hee Haw, which I grew up on in the 70s, and just the corniest show in the world. But that inspired me. I mean, you asked about today, but nobody today. I don't know. I can't think of it. But that type of, just really cornball. If I ever try to be funny or inspirational or whatever, it's usually in a very corny way, like a groaner. Usually anything I say is going to be a pun or something that people are like, oh gosh. And self-deprecation.
Which is great too, because when that doesn't land, that then becomes the joke.
Yeah,
right, exactly.
They're laughing.
Nobody got that.
Yes.
I'm like, great. 2 people, 2, I'll take 2.
And then the joke is on me.
more than I have before,
and that's fun. That's great too.
Yeah.
How about maybe a movie that you feel like, I don't know, you have a fist pump moment during a movie, and you're like, that's awesome. That's good media right there.
My favorite movie of all time is It's a Wonderful Life, which I didn't grow up. I'm embarrassed because a friend of mine, Marcus Allen, who's
Oh, sure.
Yes, when we worked together years ago in Sacramento radio, he was talking about this movie, and I was like, what do you, he played a segment on his show, Merry Christmas. Oh, what's that from? It's A Wonderful Life. And I was like, what? And
I know it is, but what movie is that?
It becomes a routine.
And at that time, he's telling me about, it runs every year on all these channels. I just can't believe that I'd made it to like 22 or 23 and had never even heard of that movie. Had never seen it. So I went home afterwards, rented it, and I was like smitten by this movie. I thought it was great in so many areas. Just the message, the acting, the characters. And I've watched that by far more than any movie in existence. And so I'm inspired by that in more ways than one. Inadvertently, I didn't know when I first started watching that 35 plus years ago that I would be kind of, I won't say that I have anywhere near any importance like George Bailey, but I used to have that wanderlust like him, where I wanted to leave town and dust the crummy old dirt off of this town and go see the world. And, and I've stayed in Bedford Falls. Stockton is my Bedford Falls, and no regrets. I mean, I love my city, warts and all, and so I guess that's been inspirational, and in a weird way, it was probably a terrible answer to a great question.
And it's the perfect segue to the next question. And the thing I think we can close on today is that if everybody is a teacher and as a broadcaster and as a student, if where they come from matters and it becomes part of their story and who they are, then I'm going to ask you first, and then I'll ask you, what does your hometown mean to you?
That's an interesting question, because I grew up kind of in the middle of nowhere on the edge of a very small town. So is that my hometown, or is it the next town over, which was the bigger metropolis?
Name them both.
So Creston, California, and Atascadero, California. And I went to Atascadero High, and so that place, it was very conflicted with that place, because I was very different than most of the people there. And so I felt like an outsider. And I feel that maybe that outsider perspective has kind of stayed with me a little bit in life. So I'm always coming from a place of almost the underdog, the outsider. And now when I return to Atascadero, it's this strange feeling of like you have to leave in order to go home. You can really see it for what it is, and it's a really remarkable experience when you do leave your hometown and then come back and experience it.
I could echo that. I mean, the whole time that I grew up here, 18 years or so before I went down to Fullerton and did 7 years there, I always grew up with Southern California, and then I got down there. Oh, Southern California, nice. And then, during that time, housing recession, we were the leader in foreclosures during that time. I showed the Big Short in class, in econ class. We represent in so many ways, right? We taught many charts, many a chart up in topped in Stockton. But I always used to say that it's a good place to be from. And sometimes people take that as like it's a good place to get out of. But I never really meant it that way, because if it wasn't here, I wouldn't have got a good education. I wouldn't have started here at this station and got the experience and the confidence to go and run the college station and then elevate and get to LA. And I wouldn't have become the person that I am. And so much of like this Central Valley growing up in Kings games and suburban life, but with agriculture here and respecting working class people and being near the Bay Area. There's so much about being a Californian, but being a Central Valley, which you'll recognize too, is kind of a neat place to be, and it does become part of you. It has always kept a respect for me, for conservatives, and then going to the Bay Area for people who have different viewpoints too, for Democrats and Republicans, and it makes me more of an open-minded person that I had friends who were everything. Friends that were farmers, friends that were in broadcasting, friends that taught. And so for me, I'd say that it's part of being a well-rounded, a mile wide but a foot deep. I feel like a lot of that is Stockton in me, and working at the ballpark. I mean, what a great first American job. That couldn't have happened in very many places.
That's true.
So that's it for me. And how about for you?
Oh my gosh, yeah. Like I said a minute ago, I mean, I couldn't wait to get out of this town, because especially in a career like radio, the higher you go, the more you make, the better name you make for yourself. I thought, I'd be in San Francisco or LA, and then be able to come back and retire and
be the legend of the town.
And write my own, ticket or whatever. But having stayed here, family was here, raising my kids here, I never thought I'd do that, but I'm so glad I did, because it's changed my perspective. I mean, you'd be hard pressed to find a better cheerleader for Stockton.
That's true.
I'm wearing it. And because I see it for what it is, and I used to think, oh, I'm too good for Stockton. I'm going to go someplace else where, you know, but I'm not at all. I mean, in some ways, Stockton's too good for me at times. and it's just, I tell people constantly that it's the kind of place where if you're looking for trouble, you can find it quickly. But if you're looking to avoid trouble, you can do that too. It's full of culture. It's full of diversity, which I love. And it also has taught me street smarts. And that's something, you know, growing up downtown, I used to wander much to my parents. People were like, "Well, how did they let you do it?" Well, same, you know, they thought I was still in the backyard, the front yard, whatever. And I would wander downtown, sometimes with friends, sometimes not. But it taught me how to deal with situations and people, and that was an invaluable education right there. And I've just come to appreciate so much about the city, the history, where it's going now. There's like a young artsy scene that's really bringing back the downtown, which I love, and I'm glad I didn't give up on my city.
That's awesome.
It is interesting how when we're younger, we always kind of reject where we're at. Like, this isn't where it's happening. I'm going to go over there. And then we go over there and we're like, oh dear, well, over there, and then we realize, oh, I was going to go home and relax.
Grass is greener syndrome.
Right, yeah.
For sure. And wherever we grow up, becoming educated becomes so much of a part of who we are. And no matter where you teach or where you learn, a lot of that education's it's going to come outside the classroom. So you need to be prepared for those lessons in life. And for that, we're thanking you for being a part of sharing that with us today. Hopefully we'll talk with you again down the line. And just so grateful that we could have this conversation this time with you.
The pleasure was mine. Thank you so
Really
much.
appreciate it.
So we thank you so much for joining us today on Inspiring Teachers. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Find us on Instagram and Twitter, and subscribe to the podcast on iTunes. And don't forget, if you're in Stockton area, 105.9 The Bull. Can they listen online too as well?
Yes, yeah, you can listen online. We have indoor plumbing too. We're really high tech here. So
It's moving along, man.
this is StocktonCountry.com is where you can find a link, or we're also on the TuneIn Radio app.
There you go. Everything you need to know and more. So we'll see you on the next edition. For now, class is dismissed. Have a wonderful day. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.